You're on 94.1 FM 3WBC with Jerry Guirguis presenting the Egypt Australia Radio Show, a weekly English edition covering local and international news sourced from Australia, Egypt and the Greater Middle East and North Africa region. The program affectionately covers the arts, culture, trade and politics. And now here's Jerry Guirguis presenting the Egypt Australia Radio Show, 94.1 FM 3WBC, the voice of the Inner East.
Hi, my name is Jerry Guirguis, presenting tonight's interview on 3WBC 94.1 FM, 3WBC Egypt Australia Radio Show, and affectionately known as EARS. My special guest tonight is from the Netherlands, Dr. Toon Sykora, Curator, Collections Egypt and Nubia at the RMO, RIJKS-MUSEUM van OUD-HEDEN, Leiden National Museum of Antiquities. Mention Leiden National Museum of Antiquities and automatically Netherlands comes to mind. Include in the mix Leiden Papyrological Institute, throw in the Netherlands Institute for the Near East. Remembering not long ago, the 13th International Congress of Egyptology and International Association of Egyptology all gathered for discussion about Egyptology at the wonderful country of the Netherlands. Okay, where's the Netherlands? That's northwest of Germany and north of Belgium. Amsterdam is its capital, and Leiden University, if you draw the line, is between Amsterdam and Hague. They say one gallery door closes, another opens. Well, Queensland Museum will be opening its doors to the public, showcasing Discovering Ancient Egypt exhibition, which starts on the 25th of October. Discovering Ancient Egypt exhibition was previously at the Western Australian Museum, then it travelled to National Museum of Australia in Canberra. Now it's coming to Queensland Museum, Kurilpa, which is Brisbane, Australia. Like I said before, my very, very special guest tonight is from the Netherlands, Dr. Toon Sykora, Curator, Collections of Egypt and Nubia. Hi and welcome.
Hi, Jerry. And you can just say Toon or leave the titles out, please.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. Now, let's just begin. What is in Queensland Museum exhibition that's going to blow away the sands from NGVs, which really happens, and it's going to finish on the 6th of October. So the NGV closes on the 6th of October. Queensland Museum opens on the 25th of October, and that's really great for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what isn't going to blow people's minds? It's going to be a fantastic exhibition, obviously. Not only, there are several highlights of the Leiden collection that will be put on display. Beautiful objects that are wonderfully well preserved. But the main reason, at least personally for me, is that not only you have these awesome, well-preserved, beautifully painted objects from ancient Egypt, but you also have very personal ones. So you do really meet the ancient Egyptians through the objects they left us. And that's, I think, the personal connection is way more interesting than what you can see in the big art pieces and the official monuments and so on. Then there are two highlights that I would like to really emphasize here. The first one of these that we have also made the choice to put some mummified people on display. There are 5 bodies of ancient Egyptians that will be, it will be a choice. It's completely open whether you want to see this or not. That will be respectfully placed in the exhibition hall. So you will be able to meet Sensaos, Tanetgaru and Harerem, and to unidentified people from the ancient past. we have also done very recent scans, CT scans of these people, and that allows us to tell you something about their lives. And this is very recent research, so something that wasn't really known 10 years beforehand. Then the second one, that will be awesome because it's the first time that this will be put on display ever. It's a really first in the world, is a lovely collection of objects from the Garstang excavations in Esna. This is from the Queensland Museum itself, and it's the first time that public will be able to view this full collection. So it will be really a treat for the eye, and especially a treat for people who are scientifically curious.
Right, okay. So that's, like you've mentioned, the first time ever, these 34 vessels.
Yeah, it's quite exceptional. Yeah.
That is so fantastic. How and why the Queensland Museum comes to hold them has never been told. So the Queensland has never told that story.
No, and I do also know, sorry if I'm interrupting you, but I do also know that they really want to emphasize the story. How was this excavated? How did this become part of this museum's collection? So if you do want a very good case study of how a collection from ancient Egypt ends up all the way on the other side of the world, then this would be a lovely encounter to do this.
Wow, and okay, I won't spoil it because we'll have to wait till the 25th of October.
Yes.
The NGV Winter, I just want to make the point here, NGV Winter masterpiece, the PHARAOH, which is happening around the corner from my place here. The PHARAOH had 500 objects from the British Museum. Let me just underline the word British Museum here. Discovering Ancient Egypt exhibition at the Queensland Museum that's coming up on the 25th of October in Brisbane are displaying 200 objects. Is that correct?
Well, more than 200. I think we have 200 and almost 250 objects that are
right. Okay.
Although I mean, a number doesn't say a lot.
Okay. But importantly, the differentiation point here, it's not from the British, it's from the Netherlands collection.
Wow. Yes, it's from the Leiden collection. So from the Dutch collection, the National Museum of Antiquities, indeed. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. And it's not about quality. It's about it's not about quantity. It's about quality. That matters at the end of the day. At the end of the day. Now, let me just take a few seconds. I just want to say, now going back in time, many, many years ago for myself, I had to look up one Dutch collector. His name is Gerard van Papenbroek. And I asked myself, who is this gentleman? Well, he was born in 1673 and passed away 1743. I just want to sort of stick a stick in the sand. So 1673 to 1743. We know that his collection is one of the largest 18th century Dutch art collection. And after he dies, this wonderful man, he leaves it all to the Leiden University. These antiquities would become the earliest collection of the Dutch and at the National Museum of Antiquities. Now, Gerard doesn't travel to the Mediterranean or the Middle East to buy antiquities. He goes directly to other collectors, doing a bit of wholesaling in his heydays. Now, because I have you here with me, Toon, tonight, I'm of the understanding that Papenbroek, right, collection included Egyptian objects. Was that true or not?
It might have included a few tiny objects, but those were never entered in the museum's collection here in Leiden. So if it did include Egyptian objects, that they are not really what the collection is famous for. It's mainly, this collection consisted of large sculptures from ancient Greek and Rome, and that's really what it's what is well known for. But Papenbroek is a very good example because it's a typical collection of this time. In the 18th century, you had these very rich people, usually guys, of course, who collected lots of stuff from the ancient past. And
Yes.
they weren't really interested in the exact provenance of these pieces. They just wanted pretty objects to put in their halls of their large palaces, and or their large villas in this case. And Papenbroek is a good example of this. So fortunately,
Yes.
he donated, or his collection through several steps became part of a museum collection. So it's now accessible for the larger public. But we have similar stories for the collection of Leiden, the Egyptian collection of Leiden, for instance. So there are lots and lots of these very rich collectors that eventually donated or gifted their collections to the museum.
Look, I'm glad that you've done that. You said that to me. Now, Egyptology, as we know, is as old as the hills, well before the 1500 historians and their publications. We know that. Looking back in time, if I may, I just want to go, there's my stick in the sand again, and just pointing out some time. So we talked about Gerard between 1673 and 1743. That's 16 and 17, right? But if we go to Napoleon, which is another milestone in history as well, to say the least. Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt in 1798, right? So that's once another mark in the sand. Then comes another gentleman, a Dutch historian and archaeologist, in 1793, going to 1835. Now, he is the founding director of Dutch National Museum of Antiquities in Leiden. So that's another stick in the sand. Then comes another gentleman, and the reason why I'm making reference to this guy, he's a British Egyptologist, and he's in the 1869 to 1949. Okay, this is the British Egyptologist Percy Newbury. The reason why I'm saying that's because he helped young Howard Carter, at the age of 17, to go to Egypt and draw as much as he wants, because he was a fantastic thing to do. So that was in 1891. So we're still coming up, not at the 1891. The reason why I'm saying all of that, it's because, like I said, Egyptology is as old as the hills. Now, Toon, what's the oldest Egyptian object that's in the Netherlands collections, whether it's in university, galleries, or private collection?
Yeah, I'm very glad that you already mentioned at the very start that it's really Egyptology does date back way before those names that you just called out. Indeed, even in Leiden, the earliest collection that we do have that included ancient Egyptian objects was already established in 1620. So that's over 400 years ago. And it was part of this, we call this the anatomical theater. So you should imagine a large wooden circle-like structure of people sitting on tribunes with in the middle a huge altar, almost altar-like thing, where they dissected human bodies. So it was really an anatomical school, more or less. And then on the sides of this chamber, there were showcases with all kinds of objects. I mean, the most random stuff. And some of those came from ancient Egypt. And for instance, they had, and that's the main interest why this collection was in this anatomical theater, they had 2 human bodies also on display. And this whole collection of this anatomical theater, at least the archaeological objects, then in the end became part of the National Museum of Antiquities. So this is really the earliest collection in Leiden and in the Netherlands in general that we can trace back. But if I may extend that a bit longer, actually, if you want to go to the start of Egyptology, you have to look at ancient Egypt, because the ancient Egyptians already were interested interested in their past. They made huge family trees. They did some proper historical researches. They even excavated. And it's quite fascinating to see that the Egyptians were already really fascinated by their own history. And then you have, of course, the whole Islamic Middle Ages, the early Islamic period, where lots of people are doing excavations, are writing about trying to translate hieroglyphs. So there is so much before the Europeans even knew that ancient Egypt existed.
Right. Well, and I'm glad you've said that, Toon. So this is back in the 1620, another mark in the sand. If I can move on, let's talk about something that's I want to clarify, and having you on board here makes it much easier. Let's talk about time and Egyptian calendar. Now,
a complicated topic, but let's.
I just wanted to. So we talk about Dynasty 1, and these categories, of course, is by Europeans. So we're Dynasty 1 right up till Dynasty 31, 32, 33, and so forth. But 31 will stop there just for the reason of being Egyptian. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Just a brief note there. Actually, this dynasty system is not a European one. It's one that was invented by an Egyptian priest, and already in the Ptolemaic period, we call this. So at the time that Egypt was run by Greek kings and queens. So in just before the time of Cleopatra. So this dynasty system actually goes back a long while, more than 2000 years already.
Yeah, yes, so I was trying to say, I was trying to allude to the sequential dating. So, and as we know, we have ruler A came before ruler B, then came the next generation. So it's a generational grandfather, father, son, generational stuff that we use in IT.
Yeah.
This particular calendar, now we know there's old calendars and new calendars. Can you make reference, can you talk about one of the solar calendars?
Yeah, actually it's a very interesting topic. The Egyptians were the first ones to invent, let's say, it was a gradual process, but to create a calendar with 12 months and 30 days in each month. So it's quite similar to the one we have today. Then at the end of the year, they had to add a few days to make it all work. But so the calendar that we're used to, with weeks then divided in months, then almost 30 days a month, that's really something that dates back to the ancient Egyptian past, and it's quite early on already. But one of the big differences with our calendar, as you already said, is that they didn't really have for instance, they wouldn't have said we're living in 1200 BC, for instance. They would have said something like, I'm living in the 5th year of King Tut. And then when a new king came by, they started counting again. So every time you have to count, you have to start over. And it is not that strange, because what was important for the ancient Egyptians was that they could start the harvest in time, that they knew when the Nile would be flooding. So it was very important that they could day specific during the year say whenever where in the year they exactly were. So that's why they had such an accurate year system, year calendar, but you can't really use it very well to try to date how old exactly something is. That's a bit tricky.
Yes. So it's a mechanism of even though it's a unit in itself, so it's in a simplex way, it is kind of making reference to the stars and so forth, but it wasn't used in their history, like you said quite clearly. Right. Now, this is the funny bit that I'm probably going to go off, and I hope I don't get you so upset.
Now you make me curious, Jerry.
Just yesterday, being the 11th of September 2024, Egyptians marked the beginning of the new Egyptian calendar day, and they referred that as the first day of Tut. And the year is 6,266 as to that calendar. Now, I'll stop there because I could factually, you can tell me a little bit more. The expression explains it. So tell me a little bit about that 6,266 years that I can't calculate. Even if I divide and add, I'm missing 1,000 years.
Yes, exactly. I think, I'm afraid I have the same problem. So Egyptian history, well, between brackets, Egyptian history, let's say what we know of written Egyptian history, it can bring you back to around 3000 BC. They started writing things just before that, 3200, 3100 BC. So that's around 5000 years ago, more or less. That's when the first king unites Egypt. Of course, before that time, there was already in Egypt, but Egypt was divided for several, you had several kingdoms at the time, each competing for to be the most important one. And then eventually around 3000 BC, there was this one king who actually succeeded in that. That's around the same time that you have writing. Of course, we have a lot of information about from archaeology, which does tell the story from the time before this moment, which tells us that there was already quite a rich Egyptian culture thousands of years before that. For instance, the date that you mentioned, 6,200, what was it again?
6,266.
Yeah, that took place somewhere early in the pre-dynastic. The Egyptologists call this pre-dynastic, and this is really the time when you start to recognize Egyptian elements, things that are later become really very obviously Egyptian. The different styles of the pharaoh, things that look like symbols you later see. But obviously, those weren't the first Egyptians either. You already had people living in Egypt for hundreds of thousands of years already.
Yes.
So Egypt was one of the first areas in the world where people lived. So how this 6,000-year chronology fits in there, that I'm not really sure of, but it's clearly not based on the ancient Egyptian records, because there are no Egyptian records, written records that can bring us that far back.
Right. Toon, you know, there's always good references from AD. We've got other calendars back to the AD. There's also the Coptic calendar, and before that there's the Jewish calendars, and you can stay there and study them and make reference and cross-pollinate and find out more. But as I understand, the 6,266 is like, where in the sand do you quantify that being the starting point? Because like you said, 100,000, and if we have, people traveling from exiting out of Africa 7 million years ago, eventually they went right around, they came to the northern part of Australia, and we've got 65,000 years.
Yeah, which is quite interesting, because the people who went to Australia, probably their ancestors all came to Egypt. So in some sense, Australia is directly connected through the past, of prehistoric past, with Egypt.
We never know. We're still finding out. We've got the wonderful bones of the Mungo man, and that's dated 40,000. Paleontologists around the world, Australian paleontologists, talk remarkably about bones in Egypt, well-preserved bones in Egypt of various animals, of course. So that's the paleontologists at their best, and archaeologists, and I'm glad that you're here. So the 6,266, we'll just have to leave that there. all of the rulers of Egypt add up to 6,266 years of history. Let's just work on that argument because, yeah, go on.
Well, no, they don't. There have been lots and lots of people who have looked at this from a biblical point of view, from an Egyptologist point of view, and the information we do have, and we have quite a lot of information, king lists, individual kings that we can add to these, year dates in many cases, and these make it quite clear, and it fully corresponds with what we know from scientific evidence, what we know from archaeology, that the first king of United Egypt dates around 3000 BC. You can give it more or less a century in either direction, but I mean, 6,000 years ago, that's really not possible. Then you're very much in the pre-dynastic, what we call pre-dynastic. There were people living in Egypt, but no unified kings.
Here. Okay. I made reference to the oldest solar calendar, and we talked about quite a bit about the calendars throughout the 31 plus or more than that dynasties. And we've covered that pretty much, and we can always say the 6,266 myth is busted.
That's perhaps will go too far. But if I may add a little different thing, is that Egyptian history, and this is something that's not often emphasized, it doesn't stop in the 31st dynasty, because there's a whole history afterwards. There's a hugely interesting early Coptic period. There's a wonderful medieval early Islamic period in Egypt, and Egyptian history is still going on. So let's look at Egypt through the lens of looking at its entire history from the early prehistoric to the current age. I think this is the only way to really look at something like ancient Egypt within its proper context.
I want to also just very quickly, and I'm conscious of our current times, I do want to congratulate you on the use of the epigraph. And yeah, so well done, because I've seen the before and the after results. Your PhD was based on that?
Yes, indeed. So for my PhD, I did a study of a tomb of around 4,000 years old, which is hugely damaged, but used to be one of the most lovely painted tombs in Egypt, with wonderful scenes, and very interesting one. One of those, for instance, does show a huge scene where you can see a statue of 60 tons, perhaps, being dragged around. So it's very interesting material if you want to say something about how Egyptians built these huge monuments. And I did epigraphy, which means that I read through what we can still see of the original decoration. And it gives you so much information. I mean, every little figure, every little hieroglyph has its own story to tell. So that's probably why you need a full PhD to properly explore even a single Egyptian tomb. But many of those stories will be visible not from my PhD, but will be visible in the exhibition, because even single objects can already tell so much. And I think it will become obvious when you're standing in front of those. So do please visit the exhibition. You will not be disappointed.
Thank you. Let's just remind our listeners again, it is coming to Queensland Museum on the 25th of October, and be part of it. And thank you so much again. Sincerely, thank you for allocating the time, Dr. Toon Sykora.
Thank you for the lovely chat, Sherry. See you.
Bye.